It was supposed to be just another quiet evening. The sun was dipping low, casting a warm, golden hue across the small town of Elkridge. The leaves rustled gently in the breeze, and the street outside was empty, peaceful. But in the span of a single heartbeat, that peace shattered forever. A scream tore through the air, then a gunshot, and everything changed. "No, Max." Daniel's voice cracked with desperation as the gunman raised his weapon again. But Max, his golden retriever, his partner, his only real family, didn't hesitate. The dog darted forward, teeth bared, eyes fixed on the intruder who had just kicked in the back door. Daniel, a war veteran who had seen too much violence already, had moved to Elkridge hoping to leave that life behind. He bought a modest home at the edge of town, took long walks in the woods, and spent most of his days with Max, the dog he rescued during his final deployment overseas. They were inseparable. Where Daniel went, Max followed. Until that night. Until the gunman. Max lunged just as the man's finger curled on the trigger. And Daniel, driven by something deeper than instinct, by love, by loyalty, by the bond only a soldier and his war dog could share, threw himself into the path of the bullet. It hit him hard. His body crumpled against the kitchen tiles. But even as pain exploded in his chest, he saw Max clamp down on the gunman's arm, wrestling the weapon free. A second shot went wild, striking a cupboard. The intruder screamed and fled, blood trailing from his mangled wrist. Silence fell, except for the soft whimpers of a dog nudging its owner. Daniel gasped. The pain was unlike anything he'd ever felt, but Max was there, licking his face, tail thumping, frantic eyes locked on Daniel's. Max wasn't going to let him go. Not like this. Not tonight. Sirens howled in the distance. Someone had heard the shots. And in that agonizing moment before blacking out, Daniel whispered, "Good boy. You saved me too." 2 weeks earlier, life had felt almost normal. Daniel had just picked up Max's favorite treat, smoked jerky, from the local vet's office. As he walked through town, people waved. Some knew his story, some didn't. But everyone knew Max's kids would run up to him, burying their hands in his thick golden coat. He had a kind of quiet heroism about him, like he knew what humans didn't. But under that calm surface, Daniel had his demons. Nights were restless. He would wake up gasping, heart racing, soaked in sweat. The nightmares were never the same, but Max was always there, sometimes wounded, sometimes gone. And each morning, when Daniel opened his eyes, Max was lying right there beside him, as if to say, "We made it through another one." The break-in didn't come out of nowhere. Earlier that day, Daniel noticed a car parked too long across the street. It wasn't anyone from the neighborhood. Max had stood by the window, ears perked, body tense. Something was off. When Daniel stepped outside to get the mail, he locked eyes with a man sitting in that car. The man didn't smile, didn't wave, just stared. Daniel didn't know it yet, but that man had been watching him for days. Back inside, Max wouldn't settle. He kept pacing between rooms, barked at shadows. Daniel tried to brush it off, telling himself he was being paranoid. But Max wasn't wrong. That night, Daniel was washing dishes when he heard glass shatter from the back. He turned just in time to see a figure in black rush through the door. And Max, without a second of hesitation, launched forward. Daniel had no weapon nearby. No time to think. Just the sound of the intruder's footsteps, Max's snarl. And then, the gun, the blast, the floor. Even as darkness pulled at the edges of his vision, Daniel saw Max refusing to back down. Even injured, even scared, the dog fought for his human like a soldier in the field. He didn't run. He didn't surrender. And neither would Daniel. The hospital lights were blinding. Beeping machines. Muffled voices. Painkillers that made everything blurry. But the first thing Daniel asked wasn't about his wound. It was, "Where's Max?" A nurse smiled. "Your dog. He hasn't left the waiting room. Not once." And when they brought Max in, and Daniel reached out with trembling fingers to touch his fur, it was like something in both of them healed. Not the wound in his chest, not the cracked ribs, but the deeper things. The loneliness, the fear, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, love could still win. But that peace wouldn't last long, because the man who broke in, he wasn't finished yet. Max wouldn't stop growling. Even from the safety of the hospital bed, Daniel could sense it. That low, rumbling growl that meant danger wasn't over. The police officer standing near the door, Officer Karen Miller, glanced at the dog and then at Daniel. He's been like that every time someone unfamiliar walks in. Your dog's got good instincts. Daniel sat up slowly, wincing as pain shot through his ribs. Instincts kept me alive more than once. Miller nodded. We got a partial print off the weapon. Looks like your intruder wasn't acting alone. His name is Tony Griggs. He's got priors, burglary, assault, illegal possession. But get this, his last address? It's connected to a known smuggling ring. Daniel's breath caught. Smuggling. Guns, drugs. And this might be the weird part, illegal animals. Daniel looked down at Max, who was now resting his head gently on his lap, the growl fading but the tension still in his body. They were watching Max. Or you, Miller said, almost in a whisper. We think Tony wasn't just robbing your place. He was looking for something specific. Did you notice anything missing? Daniel shook his head. I barely had time to hit the ground. She handed him a small notebook. Jot down anything, even if it seems small. But Daniel already had a sick feeling in his gut. This wasn't just a robbery. That night, they transferred him back home under police surveillance. The doctors didn't like it, but Daniel insisted. Max wouldn't leave his side, and being home, no matter how damaged, felt safer than any hospital bed. What they didn't expect was what Max found buried behind the shed the next morning. Daniel watched as Max clawed at the dirt, frantically digging. He hobbled outside, still wrapped in bandages, and knelt as best he could. There, hidden beneath layers of soil, was a metal lockbox. One Daniel had never seen before. It took a crowbar and shaking hands to pry it open. Inside were documents. Old, yellowed papers, photographs, military files, and a flash drive wrapped in plastic. Daniel's hands trembled. He recognized the insignia on one file. The 219th Recon Division. His unit. He remembered the day he found Max, years ago in Kandahar. They had raided an abandoned building thought to be a supply depot. What they found instead were cages. Stacked, filthy, and filled with animals barely clinging to life. Max was the only one they could save. A pup, scared and growling, but strong. Daniel had defied orders and smuggled him out. He thought he had buried that secret with the war. But someone else remembered. He loaded the flash drive onto his laptop. The screen flickered to life. Dozens of video files, each labeled by date and location. They were surveillance clips, smuggling drops, military handovers, shady transactions. But one file stopped him cold. A grainy image showed a soldier kneeling next to a cage. Inside was Max, barking and trying to bite through the wire. The timestamp? 2 days before Daniel rescued him. Another file showed someone opening those cages. An American officer with a scar along his jawline. Daniel knew that face. Captain Ross, his commanding officer. Daniel muttered to himself. What the hell were you involved in, Ross? He called Officer Miller immediately. When she arrived and saw the files, her eyes widened. If this is real, it's a direct link to war crimes and international smuggling. And your dog, he's the last living proof. Daniel clenched his fists. Then they'll keep coming for him. Miller nodded grimly. I'll send this to federal agents, but it might not be fast enough. You need to disappear. Disappear. Go somewhere no one will look for you. Just for a while. I'll make it look like you were transferred to a secure facility. But Daniel... She looked at Max. That dog didn't just save your life. He uncovered something bigger than both of you. By morning, Daniel was gone. He packed lightly. Just essentials, the documents, the flash drive, and Max. A friend from the VA lent him a cabin deep in the Appalachians. No phone signal. No neighbors. Just him, the trees, and the cold mountain air. Max adjusted quickly, sniffing every corner of the forest like a sentry. Daniel tried to rest, but sleep was always light. Every snap of a twig outside made him tense. He knew they hadn't stopped looking. One night, as he sat near the fireplace, flipping through the military file, Max lifted his head and growled. Daniel turned off the lantern. Silence. Then a branch cracked. Max barked. Daniel grabbed his sidearm. A shadow moved past the window. Max launched toward the door, barking louder now. Daniel stood up, keeping low. Another sound. This time footsteps circling the cabin. And then a voice from outside. You've got something that doesn't belong to you. Daniel froze. Hand over the dog, or the next bullet won't miss. Max was snarling now, a low, vicious sound that echoed in the wooden walls. Daniel looked down at his friend. Not a chance in hell. And as the door shook from a sudden kick, Daniel raised his weapon, heart pounding, determined. Because this time, they wouldn't be ready for what he and Max had planned. The door splintered inward. The man outside burst through, dressed in black tactical gear, face masked, gun raised. He expected fear. He expected surrender. But what he got was Max, springing like a golden missile from the shadows. Max hit him in the chest before the man even cleared the threshold, teeth clamping onto his forearm. The intruder screamed, fired a wild shot into the ceiling, and staggered backward. Daniel was right behind Max. He moved on instinct, military training kicking in. He dropped to a knee and fired once. The bullet hit the attacker in the leg. The man fell, howling in pain, gun clattering across the floor. Max didn't let go. Daniel stepped in, kicked the weapon away, and dragged the man fully inside the cabin. He slammed the door shut, chest heaving. Max finally released his grip and stood beside Daniel, panting but proud. Daniel ripped the mask off the man's face. It wasn't just a thug. It was someone he knew. "Corporal Denny," Daniel muttered, voice low. "You served under me." "Why?" Denny spat blood. "They paid well. And you should have stayed buried." Daniel's hands trembled, not from fear, but fury. "You came after Max. You crossed the line." But there was no time to interrogate. Max's ears twitched. He was growling again. More were coming. Daniel bound Denny's hands and shoved him in the coat closet. Then he grabbed his emergency bag, pre-packed days ago, and bolted into the woods with Max at his side. Snow had started to fall. The moonlight lit a silver trail through the pines. Daniel and Max ran hard, breath steaming in the cold, boots crunching in the snow. Behind them, gunfire cracked. But they kept moving. For miles they ran, until they reached the rocky gorge where Daniel had prepared a hideout. A small cave, half-collapsed and invisible unless you knew where to look. He and Max ducked inside. Max curled beside him, alert but still. Daniel caught his breath. His mind raced. They wouldn't stop. Not until Max was dead. Because Max wasn't just a dog. He was evidence. He was a witness. He was family. And now they had a decision to make. Daniel looked at the flash drive again. There was one more file he hadn't opened. His hands shook as he clicked it. The video played. It was Captain Ross, recorded in a grainy night vision hue. He was talking to someone off camera. "Make sure no one gets out of there. Burn it if you have to." Another voice replied, "What about the animals?" Ross didn't hesitate. "They're not coming home." Daniel's heart turned to stone. This was it. Proof of intent. Proof that his own unit had covered up cruelty, crimes, and death. And Max. Max was the living witness who wasn't supposed to survive. He had everything he needed. But to get justice, he had to get out. By sunrise, Daniel and Max descended the mountain toward a ranger station. The radio there could reach law enforcement. As they approached, a black SUV sped up the dirt road. Daniel froze. "Run," he shouted to Max. The dog bolted toward the trees as the SUV screeched to a stop. Two men leaped out, guns drawn. Daniel raised his arms slowly. "You want me? Fine. But you won't get him." One man stepped forward. "Where's the dog?" Before Daniel could answer, a voice rang out. "Drop your weapons." Federal agents swarmed the ridge behind them, guns raised. Miller stepped through the line, her badge held high. "FBI, you're surrounded." The two men hesitated. Max barreled out of the trees like thunder, teeth flashing. One agent stepped in to stop him gently. "It's okay, boy. You're safe." Daniel collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed. They were safe. Later, in a secure facility, Daniel gave his full testimony. The files on the flash drive were authenticated. The video of Captain Ross was broadcast across networks. There were hearings, arrests, and finally justice. But none of that compared to the moment Daniel stood before a judge and watched Max receive a Medal of Valor. The courtroom was silent as the judge leaned forward. "You saved your human, young man, and helped save the truth." Max wagged his tail. Daniel bent down, eyes misting. "You did it, buddy." Months later, they returned to Elkridge. The house was repaired, the porch rebuilt, and for the first time in years, Daniel felt like he could breathe. Every morning, he and Max took long walks again. This time not as soldiers, not as fugitives, but as heroes. And on one quiet evening, as the sun dipped low and the world fell silent, Daniel sat on the porch, Max resting at his feet. "You took a bullet for me, boy," he whispered. "But you gave me back my life." Max looked up, licked his hand gently, and rested his head on Daniel's knee. Home. At last.